Welcome back, everyone, for those who've been with us since session one. And for those joining us now, welcome to this session, Journeys of Impact, the Pathways of Patient Partners. I'd like to encourage you to use the Q&A, use the chat. We would like it to be as interactive as possible, and we're so excited to have you. So I'd like to hand over to my fellow steering committee member, Simon Stones. Simon, the floor is yours.
Joab, thank you. And hello to everybody from around the world joining us for our first day of PXP by patients and for patients. It really is my honour to be joined by two wonderful individuals on this session. Got Marquetta Frost and Joel Nelson, who I'll introduce when they come to speak later today. But I think this is a star cast of some really seasoned patient partners, and I'm really looking forward to them sharing their journeys as I will do as well, and really help to give you a flavour of our experiences. And we know being a patient partner brings lots of experiences, good and bad. And in this conversation, we want to be able to share some of the positives, which really are amazing and hopefully will motivate you if you're thinking about being a patient advocate or if you already are, and if you're supporting patient partners as well, to understand those perspectives, but to also address some of the challenges and some of the negative experiences, because we feel it's important to recognise them and to work out how we can help to address them. As Joab mentioned, we really want to make this interactive, so we're going to hold a Q&A towards the end of the session. We've got the full hour, and towards the end of the session, we'll invite you to submit questions. So please do so as you go through the presentations. Feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we'll make sure we try and address them at the end of the session. So I'm Simon Stones. I am a global patient engagement leader and medical communications specialist, and I'm really, really proud to be a member of the 2025 PXP steering committee. I've lived with chronic inflammatory conditions for most of my life since childhood, and I also care for both of my parents, my mum who passed away 6 years ago, but also now my dad in their older years. And I've spent around a decade helping to better involve people with lived experience in healthcare and research. I'm currently the chair of the EULAR-PARI committee, that's the patient committee of the European Alliance of Associations for Rheumatology. And I'm also scientific director for patient engagement at Amica Scientific, which is a medical communications agency supporting clients in the pharmaceutical industry. And like I said, I'm really thrilled to be joined by Marquetta and Joel, who I will introduce as we move on. So I am facilitating today's discussion, but also really wanted to share some of my experiences and my personal journey as a patient partner. And I think, and I often hear this conversation and this reflection when I speak to other patient partners, is that we never anticipate where we are heading, where our journey is going. I certainly never could have anticipated where I would be now when I started out as a patient advocate. And when I did, it really was a stab in the dark, really. I didn't know what I was doing. I was a rather inexperienced 18-year-old who'd never been involved in research, who had actually at that point never even spoken to somebody else with one of my conditions. And I was diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis when I was 3 years old, and then went on to develop Crohn's disease, a type of inflammatory bowel disease as a teenager, and also fibromyalgia. And it was only when I was 18 that I actually sat down and spoke to somebody the same age as me who had those same experiences, who could understand what it was like to live with what is often labelled an old person's disease. And it really was a turning point in my acceptance processing of dealing with my conditions. And it was at this age when my former paediatric rheumatologist actually invited me to join a national clinical studies group in the UK for paediatric rheumatology. It was a group of clinicians and researchers in the paediatric rheumatology space. And they had 2 parents on their clinical studies group, and this was to really advocate for research in the UK for children and young people with these conditions. And they'd never had a young person before, and they asked me would I like to join. And I quite naively said yes. And I remember going to my first meeting. It was November 2012. I had just started university a couple of months prior, studying biology, and thought, oh, we'll go to this meeting. It was in a hotel in Manchester. It was quite a nice experience being invited, having a dinner with the rheumatology colleagues, and then sitting down to the meeting. And I received all of the information in advance, and it was quite scary to receive hundreds of pages of documents. And I spent quite some time going through them and not understanding a single word that was in them, talking about biomarkers and different prognostic factors and different treatments, which I'd never heard of before. And I was fascinated. I'd always been interested, and I think that's down to my illnesses, that I had always been interested and wanted to know, why do these conditions exist? What causes them? How can we help to address them? And I think having a chronic condition helped me to be inquisitive. And so I was genuinely interested in the topics which were in front of me in the agenda, but I didn't really understand how my expertise, and at that time I didn't really regard it as expertise. It was just, I had these conditions and they want me here. And the first meeting, I must admit, I was sat pretty silent in that meeting. I was taking it all in. I was listening to the conversations and realizing how intelligent the people around the table were. Some of them were actually rheumatologists who treated me as a child, which was an interesting experience. But I struggled to understand my place in this conversation, what my contribution was, because they were all clinicians with degrees, with medical degrees, with further qualifications. And what qualification did I have? Especially as a young person, having not had that exposure, it was certainly eye-opening. But as I reflect back and share my story with you, there are people who stand out as being the supporters, the people who help to encourage and empower me. And one of those people was a wonderful person from Liverpool in the UK called Jenny Preston, who really headed up and still is involved in the Generation R Alliance for young people involved in research. And I remember meeting Jenny at Liverpool Lime Street Station one day after uni, just to get my head around all of this work, what patient involvement in research was. And Jenny was really a champion and a constant supporter, and she still is now, all these years later, to support people like myself at the time, who were completely new to research, to really to empower us to recognize the value of our expertise. And there's certainly people over the years who have helped me to do that. And it's nice looking back at the journey that you take as a patient partner, because it's not a straight line, it's not a simple road. There's lots of twists and turns and dead ends, and it certainly has felt like that over the years. I often describe the process, the moving forward, as something you can't predict. And it's often the people that you meet that can help you to elevate you to the next position. I got involved in that national group, and as the meetings went on, I became more comfortable. And it was really down to really supportive chairs like Michael Beresford, Eileen Beldam, and the parent partner on that first group called Sharon Douglas, who really sort of took me under their wings and supported me, and gave me this new sense of confidence, which I didn't realize was within me. The interest in sharing my experiences, the interest in actually building up a community of other people who want to share their experiences, and to really demonstrate how lived experience is expertise, which is incredibly valuable within the health and research space. Over those years, I met different people who got me involved in different activities, and I think one of the best introductions was from pediatric rheumatologist in Newcastle called Helen Foster, who was putting together a grant application to EULAR, the European Alliance of Associations to Rheumatology. And that was to do some guidelines to transition that period when children and young people move from pediatric care to adult care. It's something I'd experienced, and it wasn't necessarily the best experience. And Helen wanted to bring me in as a co-applicant on that piece of research, to not just to share my insights, but to actually co-create what we do, to develop the guidelines and to publish them. That was also my first introduction to EULAR. And it was definitely one of the best decisions that I made to get involved with because that has led to various different roles on a European level, which again I had never expected to happen back in 2014. And it was at that time, and this is, I think, something which many of you who are patient partners on the call will be able to understand, that you meet people who are genuinely passionate, who genuinely care, who want to involve patients in a meaningful way. And they often open doors to new opportunities. That happened with EULAR when I spotted and was put into contact with the secretariat at EULAR and found out they were setting up a young people's group aged 18 to 35 and would I like to get involved in? As you will realise, and one of my one of my pieces of advice is not always to say yes, but I am definitely a yes person, and I did say yes, and it was the best decision to do so because that opened up my network to people not just in the UK but people in Europe and around the world living with rheumatic and musculoskeletal diseases. And all these years later, I've sat on various different committees, various different task forces developing guidelines, and now had the privilege of chairing the PARE committee to represent the 120 million people in Europe living with rheumatic diseases. So I could never have anticipated that. And it is by saying yes and getting involved and throwing in everything that you have that I've been able to get to this position. And reflecting back and as I'm sharing my a little bit of my story today, you'll remember, and I certainly remember the positives and the people who you've met who've really changed your lives, and there've been, I think, far too many people to name who've really had a lasting impact on what I do and the approach that I take. But with that, there are also challenges, and I'd be lying if I said there wasn't challenges over the years, and unfortunately, some of the challenges do really stick. And I think it helps to make it clearer, certainly in the position that I'm in now, to learn to say no to some activities, which is okay. And I think that stems from being a patient and sometimes being told what to do and always fitting in with, I want to do this, I want to make a difference. And I think we all want to make a difference, but sometimes we have to invest energy where it is most appropriate. And that's something I've certainly learned over the years to really evaluate personal priorities. And I'm always guided by my moral compass as well. So if something doesn't feel right in my gut, I will learn to say no. And that's something that I've certainly picked up over the years. And saying no is actually, it comes from a place of power and something which many patients around the world will experience is that lack of power, the lack of autonomy to be able to make decisions. And if you take anything away from today, I want you to know that you have the power to say no as well, that you have the power to challenge. And going back to that first position that I was in, I initially struggled to challenge researchers and academics about their position. And sometimes you would disagree, and it wouldn't necessarily be from a bad place, but it was just a lack of perspective, which just really demonstrates the power that we have as patients. We have perspective that nobody else will understand if they don't have that lived experience. And those insights are incredibly valuable by researchers, by health professionals, by industry colleagues, by regulators and payers. Those insights really can help to shape research and care in the future. So know that worth and know that you have the power in your hands to be able to contribute and shape research and healthcare in the best way possible. It's certainly been something which I've appreciated as I've grown into my role as a patient partner. And I always want to advocate for bringing your whole self to your patient advocacy role. I feel very, privileged looking back, and people often will ask, don't you wish you didn't have these conditions? And on the bad days, you sometimes feel like that, but I do genuinely feel very privileged to say that my conditions shaped my life. Sometimes bad, but for the whole in a good way because I think they've helped me to realize my value and my calling in life, which is to help shape healthcare and research with that lived experience. But also being a patient partner has helped to shape my career. I think if I hadn't got involved with research back in the day, I'd probably be teaching now, which is what I thought I always wanted to do, but sometimes you don't realize the value that you could have until you are in that position. And so being a patient partner hasn't just been something which I've enjoyed giving my insights to, but it's also put me in touch with people who would become my PhD supervisor. And that individual, Veronica Swallow from Newcastle in the UK, I have to get a shout out to Veronica because we were actually heading back from a research project meeting which she had invited me to be a co-applicant on. And she put the idea forward of doing a PhD. And it's something I hadn't really thought about, but actually I had an interest. I wanted to do something around juvenile arthritis to look at self-management and supporting young people to have a voice. And so Veronica supported me to do that. And few years later, back in 2021, I was able to complete that PhD as a person, as a researcher with lived experience, which was a huge privilege and certainly something I don't want to repeat again. But it was brilliant. But it is these touch points which shape your life. Speaking at a conference with Jenny Preston, who I mentioned previously, put me in touch with who is now my employer as well. And Claire met me at a meeting and came up to me afterwards, and we had a conversation. And then I started to do some consultancy. And then last year they set up their own medical communications agency and asked me to join them in November last year. So don't underestimate what these opportunities could do for you. They will shape your life. And I always say you get out what you put in, and in my life, I want to put in as much as I can, whilst also recognizing that I have a chronic condition and you have to prioritize that. But the key message I want people to take away from today is that you have power, you have expertise, it's valued by lots of people. And if you're in a situation where that's not feeling like it is valued, then speak up, say what you're thinking. And if that situation isn't right, then walk away. And there are other people and other organizations who will value that expertise and will certainly bring you on board as a partner, because that is where we need to be heading. We need to be doing research, delivering healthcare which is co-produced and co-designed by people with the best expertise in the world, and that is those who have the lived experience of that condition and that insights, which is something which I think we'll be seeing more and more of in the future as services and research are designed by the people with the best expertise in the world. So I will stop there because I could talk all evening, and I don't want to take too much away from our other two speakers who both have an incredible amount of expertise, which I can't wait for you to hear. And so that gives me great pleasure to introduce Marquetta Frost, our next speaker, who is a prevention specialist with substance misuse prevention services in Albion, Michigan, in the US. And she's also a youth program coordinator with the uh, Michigan State University Extension's 4H Youth Program. So that's a mouthful, but I'm looking forward to hearing more from Marquetta on her roles as well. So Marquetta serves on various boards and coalitions. She coordinates many health disparity programs, as well as providing youth leadership programs as well. She's been involved in research as a patient partner since 2019, and she's planned a summit that helped other research teams to recruit a more diverse stakeholder contributions. So, Marquetta, it's my pleasure to introduce you, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Simon. It is wonderful to be a part of this conference. This is actually one of my first real speaking engagements at a conference like this, so I am definitely honored. My name is Marquetta Frost, as he said, and I lived in Albion, Michigan, in the United States. And so it is just wonderful to be part of this conference with all of you all around the world. This is amazing. And so being a patient partner is an enormous thing that I'm just excited about and would like to share with you just a little bit about myself and my health journey. As a young person, I was involved in sports and was involved in sports until I graduated high school. The year after, things started to change with me. My father had been diagnosed with diabetes, and I saw him take his first shot. And it was something that was interesting to me, but I didn't have it, so I didn't know what was going on. 2 years later, I started having symptoms, and I was diagnosed at 19 with diabetes and high blood pressure. My mom suffered from hypertension, and my dad suffered from diabetes. Both of them have gone on, and I was really worried because they died pretty much at an early age in their 50s. And I am now in that age range. And so I definitely wanted to get my health together. And so from my hypertension and diabetes, I ended up with end-stage kidney failure, which led to me going into kidney dialysis. And I have been on dialysis or I had been on kidney dialysis the past 11 years. I got connected in patient research and partnerships through the University of Michigan, where I became listed as a kidney transplant person trying to get one. But I was put on hold because of insurance and different things they were changing about how you could get your kidney. So I continued to wait, and I did everything the doctor told me to do. My insurance was good, everything. And I ended up on the kidney transplant list again, January 2025. I got the call to get a kidney June 30th, 2025. Those 11 years that I had been on dialysis moved me up on the list where the wait time, that was a long wait time. So so I just recently got a kidney, which I am just elated about. But I still have the diabetes and the hypertension. And so I'm working more and more with the hospital, the doctors, to keep that under control. But that is a reason why I got involved in research and trying to find out how I could help myself and how I could prevent this from happening to my children. I'm the mother of two, and I definitely don't want them dealing with what I had to, and knowing that my parents had moved on because of that same situation. So I am still happy to be here, and I'm happy to share with you guys. So my journey in research and the growth of it, just like I said, I started with University of Michigan as a patient engagement studio participant. So there's a clearinghouse, and they sent out an email and said, you know, you are a patient that in the past has dealt with University of Michigan. For example, you've had an issue with hypertension. So we would like to invite you to be part of this engagement studio. It might be 60 to 90 minutes. They would compensate you for your time. And I was at home, so I decided to get involved. From there, the really cool thing was the last question they asked on the survey, on the post survey, is would you like to be contacted further about other opportunities? And I said yes, not thinking they continue to invite me to be a part, but I continued to get offers to be a part of those engagement studios, which led me to be asked to be part of this planning committee for patient-centered outcomes research called PCORI. So there's different acronyms, but I've been involved with University of Michigan with PCORI and PATH, University of Pittsburgh, PCORNet, and all of those have different meanings, but it's the same thing. It's all research and trying to make interactions with patients better, or whatever they're researching to make that better. So with that, I've been, the big thing that ended up coming out was I was on a planning committee for a summit. I had been talking with some of the researchers, and they were really concerned about diversity in research. Earlier, we heard one of the presenters talk about men and women present differently with heart issues, and most of the research patients are white, male, 18 to 35 or 45. And so a lot of people that look like me were not a part of research. So a lot of their data did not relate to my lived experience. So with the summit, we developed, it was the community of health partnerships, and we talked with different researchers. We gave them examples of patient engagement studios. We did a lot of that, and a lot of people did join in research from there. And so I was really excited to be a part of that. It was in a journal that we had submitted that. Other experiences that I've had because of my hypertension and diabetes, I'm on a hypertension learning community and a chronic kidney disease learning community. And it is amazing to learn about myself from doctors, their perspective. I'm able to give them perspective. I've also been on committees that talked about building relationships between the doctor and the patient. How do we better communicate if your blood pressure continues to stay high, they've diagnosed you or they've given you some type of treatment method and it's just not working? And so what do you do in those cases? And what are other methods that we can monitor blood pressure and monitor your progress? And so I've been able to impact that. And so it's been wonderful being part of those learning communities. And another situation that I was able to participate in was the Payers Conference in Washington, D.C. I went as a patient partner, and we met with insurance companies. Now, I was very interested in this one because I had been on the list for a kidney, and because I had a gap of insurance or something had happened, I lost my time on the list, which had me wait forever for a kidney. But the Payers Conference was very, very interesting in talking with people that pay for our different treatments and how much they pay and things like that. I felt that we were listened to. They took our comments into consideration, and I believe we impacted some of the ways that they look at ways to cover the situations that people come with to the hospital. One of the most biggest experiences that I'm involved with now is I'm part of the Michigan Embedded Scientist Training and Research group, and it's in short, it's called MELSTAR, and I'm a patient partner mentor for a PhD student. So the student is already a doctor, so he's tremendously educated, but he's getting a patient perspective on his research on hypertension. And from there, we've had plenty of conversations, just getting to know each other. We have built a friendship relationship, and from my perspective, I assist him with his research project on hypertension. So the last meeting we had as a learning community, all these doctors were talking, and they were talking about the LCD and this and that, and I just listened, and they said one thing that got my attention was people with early onset or childhood diabetes or kidney failure, hypertension, I'm sorry. And then there are some that get it later in life. And so I spoke up at that time and I said, I haven't really understood much you guys have said up to this point, but I just wanted to make sure that we separate those two, because if you have an early onset of hypertension, it's different than someone that gets it later. I'm sorry, or diabetes. And they really hung on to that, and they made some changes to some of their data collecting items. Their research was impacted by that. And so I was really, really excited about giving my lived experience there. So that's one example. Why do I do this? So just like some of the other patients, I was invited, my family experience, but I just want to say learning communities helped me to be a better patient. It's a win-win situation. They win because they take time to listen to us, and we win because we learn how to better take care of ourselves and to advocate for ourselves. Um, it's quality time. We are not just a number. We are faces. We deal with these every day, and doctors need to know that everyone's experience, even though it's the same disorder or disease, we all have different experiences with it, and they need to be able to deal with the patient and not just look at numbers. And then advocate for people of diverse backgrounds, low income, high income, educated, um, just people that have lived experience to participate in research. Doctors can't really adhere to differences within backgrounds if they don't have them at the table. So I've been working hard to advocate within my community for people to get involved. There are different cultural situations where people don't trust research. Um, there's no trust. What happens to the data when you provide that? What It builds a sense of community. They feel like they can make a difference. And our sense of community has grown now with the internet since COVID. Now our community is around the world. We can be on committees with people from all across the country making impacts on research. If you become a patient partner, ask questions. If you don't understand something, please ask the question, because if you're active in the conversation, it builds a partnership and a relationship with the leaders in the group, and they can move you on to higher experiences. Be comfortable in being uncomfortable. So when I first started, of course, we were kind of not feeling comfortable, but it's your experience. No one has lived it but you. And so you can give your perspective, and hopefully it'll impact what the doctors are doing. The more you contribute to the conversation, the more connections you'll make. People, if you don't talk, they don't know, they just don't know. So you have to be able to educate your doctor. Celebrate the wins. If you do something in research and they show you that they've used it in somehow, celebrate that, because not all the time they use all of our different contributions to what we feel like we've been asked to do. Because just telling our story is one thing, but when they ask for what's your advice on how we can better do something, if you have an idea, give it, because they actually are listening. So with that, I'm going to stop. And I appreciate you guys listening. And it's been wonderful. And I'll answer any questions at the end of the uh, session.
Marquetta, thank you so much. You're a natural speaker, so saying this is your first international conference, I thought you was amazing. And there's so many quotes that I just want to take from what you've just said. And I've made loads of notes, and I'm sure other people listening along will have questions as well. So please do put them into the Q&A, and we will come to them towards the end of the session. But one thing that really stood out for me was when you were talking about your mentee, your PhD students, and the friendship relationship that you've got. And I think that is just a reminder that actually this is how, we're all human beings, and actually the very best pieces of the work happen when people have that friendship, have that relationship, the trust, and can build that relationship and realize that we all have expertise to value. So yeah, thank you so much, Marquetta. It was a really, really insightful introduction to just a snapshot of what you've done, and I look forward to the questions later on. But before then, we have our final speaker, who I'm delighted to introduce. Joel Nelson is a patient advocate and founder of Psoriatic Disease UK. Joel lives with psoriatic juvenile arthritis and chronic pain, and has used his personal story to educate and inspire people around the world. He's hosted the Joel Nelson podcast and the Chronic Pain Club talk show, amongst many other different activities, and he's really helped to create powerful spaces for peer support. Last year, Joel launched Psoriatic Disease UK, which is a bold, patient-led organisation dedicated to raising awareness and supporting people living with psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. So with no further ado, Joel, over to you.
Simon, thank you very much for the kind introduction. It's an absolute honour to be here as part of this wonderful and much needed patient-led initiative. I know there are many people watching this who probably identify as patients, so let me start by saying that, like so many, I am an accidental advocate. I had no plans or desire to share my experiences or story, much less amplify or raise awareness of the experience of others. I think if it was up to me, I would lead a perfectly insignificant and healthy life that didn't require me to spend sort of a few days of terror and self-doubt preparing for events such as this. And there would be no drama, no catalyst, no call to action, no taking me miles out of my comfort zone in the hope of change, and certainly no heartbreak in this story. There'd also be no innocent parties like my 6-year-old son who would have to share the pain and the burden of a long-term health condition and the decisions taken in the management thereof. But unfortunately there is. So research and medicine have a constant bearing on my life and how I live it. As a child with arthritis, I was confined to months in a hospital, year in a wheelchair, years more on crutches, and whilst a whole cocktail of treatments not designed for children in mind was thrown at me to see what stuck. Throughout my teenage years, I struggled with body image, mobility, and daily vomiting from the best available treatment at the time. But I was always told this miracle drug was on the horizon and it was due to be approved any day now. That turned out to be years because in my 20s, as I adapted to having to advocate for myself as an adult, after more than a decade of my parents being given all the information whilst I sat out in the waiting room or behind a cubicle curtain, I got access to biologics. And within a month, I was virtually pain and rash free, which led to me having a successful 10-year spell of playing hockey, rugby, cycling, touring the country in a band, and basically anything else this young man could dream up that seemed previously impossible. And in my 30s, the fears and the memories of my disease started to fade, and things finally seemed stable enough for me to entertain the thought of starting a family and being the active dad that I always wished but didn't think I could ever be. So on the 13th of January 2019, my son Dylan entered the world. I was 34 years old. I was due to captain my rugby team the weekend he arrived. And after years of struggling with my weight due to lack of mobility and medication, I was the leanest I'd ever been, and I was also the happiest I'd ever been. And then, unfortunately, the very same month, with no direct conversation with my rheumatologist, my treatment was changed to a cheaper alternative. And within just a few months, I was back on crutches for the first time in over 15 years. I was unable to care for my newborn baby. I had no plan B, as I had no warning that I'd need one. And the pain from that weight of guilt that I felt as I laid on the living room floor with my infant son is still as raw today as it was back then. And that comes flooding back every time I tell this story. Nobody considered me as a person. Nobody took the time to ask what my priorities were or what was going on in my life. Worse still, the unbelievably successful way in which my disease was being controlled and the way I was able to live my life without disability at the time was seen as further justification for changing my treatment. And I found myself asking, if we are not treating for positive outcomes, if good is too good, then what are we treating for? So for 6 months, my mental health spiraled as I lost touch with my friends, unable to participate in the activities that had bonded us together. I rarely left the house, and fueled by recurring nightmares of dropping my baby due to the now chronic pain and widespread arthritis flares, I found myself dangerously depressed and come very close to acting on thoughts of being so useless on more than one occasion. Whenever I asked for help, which didn't come naturally as a 30-something-year-old man, I was told to keep taking my painkillers which meant I never woke when my son cried in the night, and placed a significant burden on my wife and her own health. To this day, my specialists have never met my son, let alone back then in that experience when I needed them to see it firsthand. How a simple treatment change timed poorly could ruin multiple lives and others' plans for them. But thankfully, a general practitioner did, and they were the first advocate I ever met, and they encouraged me to start talking about my experiences for the first time in my life. I started to share my experiences on a blog, and I quickly found hundreds of others impacted by this nationwide change. And for the first time, I realised that despite feeling like the loneliest man in the world in that moment, it wasn't just me. From that moment, I found my voice, and what's more, I found that I was the dad I was always supposed to be. So I feel like an accidental advocate. So you can imagine how far removed I felt from research. My experiences interfacing with a health system that didn't consider my personal pain points, caregivers' priorities, or treat me like a partner made me feel like a passenger and completely insignificant. I was also made to feel stupid or underqualified to participate in these discussions back then, with responses to my attempts to get involved often starting with all due respect, or it's not really something a patient would understand, despite none of these people who supposedly do understand knowing what it actually feels like to live with my disease. I was told that a scientific or medical profession or background was essential, and came away with the belief that research was limited to clinical trials, to which patients firmly belonged to one restricted side of. But as I dove headfirst into the world of advocacy, traveling the world for my son and our cause, forming relationships with incredibly inspiring peers and mentors, and now friends like Simon, and many of the other hardworking and committed people behind events such as this conference, my confidence and belief that my experience matters grew. I realised that there are only so many times that I could share my story, my one single experience, and have an impact, and that if I really wanted to make a difference, I needed to take a proactive approach and try to command a seat at tables where I could prevent these experiences from happening, as well as ensure adequate support is in place and awareness raised for those where it did. So I looked to these peers and mentors, like people like you've heard from already today, Joseph, etc., and I stood on the shoulder of giants. The psoriasis community helped me with invitations to my first advisory boards with industry. My nurses were a gateway to my first published patient perspective in a medical journal. Awareness projects gave me unique insight into research facilities and how the medicines that I'd come to rely upon are manufactured. Other advocates recommended me as plain language summary of publication peer reviewers. My speaking engagement and work sharing other stories on YouTube saw me invited to consult on the design of clinical trials to ensure patients' needs are met. And patient organisations alerted me to the development of opportunities in research, like the UPATI Patient Expert Training Programme. You see, all of these examples are patient involvement in research. And if I achieve nothing more today than to help one person watching this believe that their voice matters and that there is far more to patient involvement in research than clinical trials, then I've done my job of passing the baton as a patient advocate. Only together do we push the door from being ajar to wide open. And I wish I could end it there. That would be a wonderful happy ending, right? But like my story, and I'm sure many of yours, life doesn't always turn out that way. It hasn't been easy coming into the world of research as a patient partner, and at times being a partner is the last thing I've felt. I've been midway through projects only to have the sickening realisation that I'm only there as a token patient, or worse, the photo opportunity. I've had to wait over 90 days for compensation due to policy, as I see my medical and professional organisation colleagues paid within the month. I've had to initiate uncomfortable conversations about rates of compensation being offered for the patient expert compared to others on the same panel who are supposedly my peers. I've been brought into projects far too late to have a realistic impact on their outcome. And when asked who decided this was even a need, on those more gimmicky ideas, such as the 105th symptom tracker app to come to market this year, I'm met with blank faces and bewilderment. I have acutely noticed how many will fail to give any consideration to my health condition, the breaks I might need, or reasonable adjustments to facilitate my participation. And should I get ill, how the first question is likely to be when I will be back, not do I need anything or are you okay? However, with each passing involvement, my confidence grows, not only in my ability, but my place in the process. And with it, so does my confidence to ask questions, challenge, and most crucially, as Simon touched upon earlier, say no to those opportunities that don't feel right or that don't suit me and my family or feel tokenistic. Ensuring patient involvement is a continual process, and often it can feel like we are swimming against the current. Even when the opportunities present themselves, we need to continue to fight to ensure that it becomes the norm and not a patient tick box needed only to complete a piece of paper. We must challenge as a community and without fear of being blacklisted or that the requesters will simply move on to the next willing participant. Becoming a patient partner in research is one of the most rewarding experiences I've had as an advocate. The knowledge, insight, and experience it gives me empowers my awareness and policy work in a way that is second only to my lived experience. But those who came before me on this advocacy journey fought most of their lives for these opportunities, and it can never be taken for granted. So remember that your experience matters. Thank you for listening.
Joel, that was incredible. I mean, I hope you can look at the comments in the chat afterwards, because some of the responses are just amazing. And I personally love seeing your evolution and you fitting into this role, which you were made for over the years, from that very first blog post, which I remember reading online. It's amazing to see, and I think what I particularly love about, and this sounds a little bit cheesy, but what I love about our community, as in all people living with lived experience involved in this space, is that we lift each other up. We're here to support each other. We understand what it's like, and we always have each other's back. And I think that's something which many other sectors, many other people with different experiences won't necessarily appreciate. So well done, and that was a fantastic talk. And I know we've got a couple of questions already, and one actually, I think, while you're on screen, Joel, just fits really nicely, because I know you've not touched too much on your new organisation, which I think has done amazing work within the last 12 months already, and has so much more to do in the years to come. But Paul has asked about finding a patient advocacy group to join, and how that happens. And actually, if there isn't anything, then is there an opportunity to create something, and how do you go about that? So I thought you're best placed to answer that one.
Yeah, sure. So I must admit, I really struggled with this question when I initially thought there was a gap and a need, because the last thing I wanted to do was reinvent the wheel and split resources and everything. But for me, it was really, I'm a big sort of supporter of peer support and how that can help you cope between appointments. So for me, I maybe see my specialist once every 6 months, but it's talking to people like yourself, Simon, and the community, and running support groups and things like that is what genuinely gets me out of bed in the morning and helps me get between those appointments. So obviously, if there's a gap, then yeah, go ahead and create it. But for me, there are so many people out there doing amazing things with research. There are so many people out there doing amazing stuff with academia and industry and everything else. But for me, the way I get through my day is by being able to lean on people who understand. And sometimes that isn't actually saying I'm asking for help. It's been able to have a conversation without needing to say the things, if that makes sense. So I can reach out to somebody like you, Simon, who's got exactly the same condition as me, just like different variant. And I don't need to tell you I'm having a bad day, and we communicate between patients in a way that's different, right, than what we experience with as medical or as institutions maybe. So for me, it was really important to create a patient-led organization that just focuses on peer support and sharing others' stories, because you hit a ceiling really quickly when you're sharing your own. And I believe that with research as well, right? I'm at EADV next week. I can't go there with just my story. I need to go there with the experiences of the community, with the pain points of the community, so I can wave that flag and raise awareness to the stuff that really matters to people on the ground. So that's a bit of a woolly answer, but hopefully that answers some of what was asked.
No, perfect, Joel. And I think you raise a really important point there, when we're seeing more and more patients presenting at congresses and other conferences. And while it's important and everybody should have the opportunity to share their story as well, we are beyond just sharing stories. Like you said, we have issues, we have unmet needs, we understand what is the real pain points for the community, and we want to address those. And whether health professionals or researchers are going to partner with us to do them, if they don't, we will go ahead and do them anyway. So this is what it's all about, actually moving beyond stories, but actually tackling what are issues, and making sure what is delivered in the future is done with the real needs and hearts of the people who need that support. So no, thank you, Joel, for that response. And I know people can reach out as well if they have further questions about more of the practicalities of how you've gone about setting up Psoriatic Disease UK. But yeah, well done. We do have a couple of other comments, and I want to bring one to Marquetta actually now. So Kira's actually commented about how you train the PhD students on patient experience. So it'd be lovely to drill a little bit more into the practicalities of that relationship, how that was set up, some of the conversations. And I'd like to know a little bit more about, some of the feedback you've got, what your mentee has learned from your mentor-mentee relationship, and if there are any other ideas for people to be able to apply that to their own practice or to ask to be a mentor.
All right. Well, that is, like I said, that's one of the most I'm proud of being the patient partner. I did not have confidence when I first started with him. His name is Amir Aziza. He's from Canada originally, but he relocated to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where he's attending the University of Michigan. He applied and was awarded as a Mel-Star research student, and his research is on hypertension and chronic kidney disease. And my experiences with University of Michigan, being on the different learning committees, a gentleman by the name of Greg Merritt said that I would be awesome as a patient partner mentor. And at first I didn't know what that was. But as we've grown, I've been with him for almost a year now, and we're going into 2026 soon. But I am there to discuss the project with the research patient. And we are discussing methods of how to engage patients in his research. His research has people telling stories of their hypertension background, what they've been through, what are some issues, how do they self-advocate, and we're discussing those answers that people provide, and we are looking at what is the key factors that he can pull out to say, okay, so if most people are saying this, how do we address that, and how do we offer some type of treatment? So he's doing the heavy work, but I'm doing a lot of the lived experience, trying to help him have diversity in his research answers, recruit different people to tell their stories. But we're also looking at, in future, I'm going to be helping him present the research project and my part in that. So the Mel-Star program, I think I'm part of the second cohort. So it's a full year-long commitment that you make. You are compensated for it, which is awesome. But it's gone beyond that. I think that I would do this anyway, but it's wonderful to get that they really respect me enough to provide that type of compensation. But his research project also has other advisors and other mentors. So I'm his patient mentor. He has a lab mentor, and he has like 3 or 4 different ones. So my part is being the feet on the ground and telling him realistically, we always talk about the cultural issues in research, and how do we get them to help in his results, how to have that diversity in there. So it's a lot, but we talk at least once a month. He's right on time. He talks to me. He respects me, and I feel like we've grown. We want to meet each other in person, but I've been kind of up and down with my kidney transplant that we couldn't meet. But I'm looking forward to meeting him in person at the next conference. So, yeah. So that's it in a nutshell. But it's wonderful if you can get that opportunity. It's wonderful. It's a great experience, and we're growing together and learning together.
I think that's wonderful to hear, and the learning that you learn from him and what he's doing in the research side, but also for that student to also realize what it's like, because you see many students and many health professionals who actually don't sit down and have a conversation with people with that lived experience. And I think so many people would have a different perspective and approach to the work if they had the opportunity. So, and I think the word that you mentioned there, which underlines that, is the respect for you as an individual, as a human being, but with somebody with that expertise. So that's really important, and links to probably what will be our last question, just because we are running up against time. And this one's from Deb. So I'll position it to Joel, but Marquetta jump in as well, because this talks about the issue of the tokenism. And Deb uses the example of when you're on a team, and if you talk about compensation, for example, but then don't actually compensate you. So what are your opinions about having that conversation? Because, compensation is that topic of which, especially here in the UK, we're very British, we don't want to talk about money. But it is actually, you are offering a service, you are a consultant, and actually recognizing that and recognizing that you are usually taking time out from paid work or from other responsibilities, and that is a time and it's a value which should be recognized. So how do you deal with that conversation, Joel and Marquetta? And would you give any advice to people? I think, people with lived experience who maybe find themselves in that situation, but then also for researchers and academics who really should be making this an open dialogue so that people don't feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can relate to this way more than you could know. Like, I'm very, very familiar with this topic. And just for a bit of backstory, I think for me that I needed an eye opener. So my journey of advocacy, like many, was very much from I love doing this. It keeps me well. It takes my mind off things. I can't help my own situations. Maybe I can help others. But it very quickly merged from volunteering to finding myself doing projects where people were profiting from it. And I had this horrible realization where I went down to London to do a video for a very large organization, patient organization as well, unfortunately. And I discovered I was the only one in the room that wasn't being paid. That you had all the camera crew, you even had catering staff, and there was me. And the whole day I just wanted to walk out. And back then I was not strong enough to do that. So I think it's with the topic of tokenism, it's really important to know that is a bit of a journey. You need to find out what you're comfortable with and what you're not. And now I would absolutely walk out mid-project. Like I've got very much stronger at that. I think you also need a support network to help you with that as well, because it can feel really uncomfortable. And I think the other thing is realizing that you can't fix the issue of tokenism on your own. You can't. And the bit I really struggled with, like if I'm just being really candid and honest, is that FOMO, right? That thought that if I say no to this because it doesn't value my time, knowing that there's 1,000 other people that would love to jump on a plane and go do that speaking engagement. Like the worst one, I was invited to collect an award at a conference, and I was expected to pay for entry ticket to the conference to collect an award as a patient partner. It's absurd, right? But in the early days, you feel a lot of pressure to do that stuff because you're trying to get a seat at the table. You're trying to keep that seat at the table, and it takes a lot of courage and strength to get to a point where you say, you know what, no, I value my time and I know my worth. But unfortunately, I had to learn a lot of lessons along the way to get to that point.
Yeah, I think
So, go
Marquetta,
ahead.
some final remarks from you on that topic.
Okay, I didn't want to lose your comments on his if you wanted to make one.
No, go through it. Go through it.
Okay. My experience with compensation has really been pretty positive here in Michigan, and with my online communities. They've thought of that prior to participation. So when they invite us, they say you will be compensated this much, or you will be, we will send you a Walmart gift certificate, or they tell you ahead of time, for your time, this is what you're going to do. So I've been lucky that way, but the tokenism, as far as being one of the only African-American females that is dealing with my chronic disease, has been an issue for me. I'm in a room with a lot of people that don't look like me, and their answers are a bit different from my perspective. So I've kind of felt like maybe mine's not as important as theirs, because they sound a little more educated or whatever, but I have my degree. So I had to build that confidence. and not be intimidated. But as far as trying to get people of diversity in the same research room as me, I try to do that as much as possible. We have to advocate for others with lived experience to be a part, regardless of what their background is, but we must have diversity. It is key to real research results. If you only have one culture or one male or female all in the research, you don't get the greatest results. So that's been my biggest advocating point, is to make sure groups of diversity are involved in every aspect of the research team.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect note to finish this session on. I hate to bring it to a close, but we are at time. So thank you so much, Joel and Marquetta, for being such wonderful speakers today. I hope people have learned from the conversations that we've had, and I really encourage people to get in touch if they've got questions. And with that, I'll hand back to our host for the day, Joel. Back over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Simon and team. I'd just like to thank all the speakers, from Marquetta to Joel and Simon, for this really insightful session. Due to time, I will just go straight to housekeeping and let you know that we're going straight to the Ask Me Anything. So when we sign off from this session, please join the next session. It's starting right now. So thank you, and see you in a bit.